Alright, hello and welcome to a video that may or may never ever come out. We shall see. This video the concept for it didn't even exist prior to earlier today, and it actually is connected to a whole different project that I'm in the middle of. So right now I am writing a report for The City We Became, which was the book from last month for my book club. And for the end of every month, once we complete a book, the goal is to dig into the book, really pull what were the interesting elements and discussions happening inside the book. So in the process of writing that report for The City We Became, I ended up encountering the Call of Cthulu by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, I'm not going to get into how much Lovecraft influence there is in The City We Became, but I did want to talk about the Call of Cthulhu because I've never read any H.P. Lovecraft. I've wanted to for years. I know he is the bedrock for a lot of sci-fi horror that is my current era of book writing. So I was like, I should tap in. And because there's such a direct reference throughout this book, it made me have to check out what he was cooking up. And what he was cooking up was racist, which isn't to say that he wasn't cooking up some good shit, because I hate to say it, but I was interested throughout the entire time. And this is me. I've read recently The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And that is a case of a classic piece of literature being straight dog water, in my opinion. So boring, so juvenile in certain instances in the characterization of evil, which, to be fair, I would say applies to this Lovecraft book as well. But I think that Lovecraft just has a much more interesting way of describing the form of evil. Of course, his vague picture shaping creation of evil is a reflection of his real world prejudices and biases. But let's get there. First, let's talk about what is actually in this book, right? And if I don't hit all these points, sue me, okay? Like, maybe go actually read the book. I'm just giving you the top of my head recounting of what reading this book was like. The main character, I don't know if he's ever named. We'll call him Man-Man. And Man-Man's great uncle dies. And then he inherits like some shit from his uncle. His uncle was a professor, I think in Providence, Rhode Island, maybe not. But he's this professor and he inherits these writings from his uncle and a statue of what we will come to know to be Cthulhu. But he inherits this statue of like this cloudy green, slimy ass weird stone, and it's clearly otherworldly. And it's in this idol that's all freaky and shit. And in the writings, it's split into two manuscripts. The first manuscript talks about this dude that went and found his uncle. His grand uncle's name is George Gamble Angel. George Gamble Angel. His grand uncle's name is George Gamble Angel. We're going to call him George because that shit is, I'm not going to remember all that. But that's his grand uncle. He dies, passes this shit on to Man-Man, and Man-Man's going through it, and he's reading the first transcript. And the first manuscript is of this artist who started having these very vivid dreams of this crazy alien city that's covered in this weird architecture that's not geometrically correct and covered in this slimy stone and pervaded by this evil stinking miasma. And he's getting these dreams and he's like, I have to tell this professor for some reason. And so he goes to the professor. He's like, yo, I'm having these dreams. And he's a sculptor. And so he sculpts Cthulhu or like basically these otherworldly creatures that we're pretty sure is Cthulhu. And he comes in and he's like, yo, what do these dreams mean? And his grand uncle is actually super interested because the second manuscript talks about how he had gone to like this forum of professor, like it's like basically all these smart dudes get together and try to answer these questions for each other. And at this gathering, this dude named Inspector Legras, comes to these consortium of people, of which Man's grand uncle is a part of, George. And he's like, yo, listen, we did this raid in Louisiana a little bit ago where we went and hunted down these occultists because we were getting these calls of some fucked up shit going on in the swamp. And so we went to this place and it was a bunch of like I said, it's a very racist book. So it's Louisianian diabolicals, as he describes them at one point, or half-breed Negroes. Basically, he's calling them savage devil worshippers. And the part of the reason why the police are there is because there have been some disappearances, and apparently there was like all these body parts in a circle, and then also a circle of fire, and there are these occultists just, you know, dancing and trying to summon Cthulhu. And so homeboy Officer Legras comes, Inspector Legras, the same thing basically. They come through, they kill some of the occultists, round the rest of them up, and then they go and they find another like depiction of Cthulhu back then. And so like this was the first time that his uncle had heard of it, George. This was like the flashback, but we get it in the second manuscript. And so he's like, if this thing that happened all those years ago was like a signal, and it's matching up with these accounts of all these eldritch horrors and stuff, then there has to be some kind of connection. Like this shit might be kind of real, you know? And then the book ends. There are only like 3 parts, and the third part is like the grand nephew Man has, after he reads these 2 parts, the possibility of there being this great evil is like freaking him out, and then he just forgets about it for a couple years, until one day he comes across a newspaper clipping that's talking about these people who were on a ship that got lost at sea, and then the ship reappeared, and there was only 2 people left, one of them dead, and the other was like this mad raving dude. He was like, it's coming, whatever. They're like, yo, this dude is crazy. What happened out there? And he refused to say like what happened out there. He just said that, you know, fucked up shit went down, some people died. And so grandnephew goes and tracks him down, and it turns out he died, just like everyone else. So it's like clearly there's like this idea that these occultists are going out and killing people that know too much, right? And keeping the secret. But he goes and he finds the survivor from the shipwreck, whatever. He finds him dead, obviously, and his wife was given like this letter. She gives him the letter that the shipwreck dude wrote, and when he reads it, he finds out that while they were out there on the ship, his ship got attacked by, what do you know, some mulatto pirates. Naturally, it's some non-whites coming to fuck up shit. And of course, like, non-white people are the agents of this evil, essentially. Like, it's Inuit people, which are Eskimos. It's Inuit people, it is Negroes, it's mulattoes, it's just anybody who is not white are the carriers of this long dead, very toxic, monstrous tradition that is carried throughout the year. So these pirates roll up and they start firing on the boat. They end up being able to overtake the pirates, even though they lose a couple people. And then they take over the pirates' boat because in the fight their boat sank. And so now they're trying to make it back home, and then they come across the fucking city of Riley. So, or Rillier, or whatever, however you call it. So basically the way it's kind of depicted is Cthulhu and all of these old ancient gods are sleeping / trapped in this underground subterranean alien eldritch city called Relier, and it's actively undead. It carries these corpses of ancient gods, and it kind of like is connected to their will, and it's filled with a stinking miasma. He describes it as cyclopean, but I think that just means it's like giant, like everything is like a land of giants. They show up on this place and they accidentally touch a panel, and the panel opens up and the tentacle of Cthulhu comes out, and he starts fucking up the crew. Like he crushes a couple in his claws. Like the horror of this moment is well cultivated, I feel like. I hate to give it to him, but I mean, this racist could write. And the crew of the ship gets attacked. A couple of them die from fright just from seeing of it. Something that's a huge hallmark of old-timey horror, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And now this book is that they have this, they'll really describe something being just so horrific that the human body can't even comprehend. It's very like a very dramatic, like stage play theater type of horror that when you are consuming it through reading it, it really plays it up into this grand moment that I think really happens at the climax of this book. Everyone dies except for him and one other dude that make it away onto the ship. And as they're riding away, they see Cthulhu slip out of the city of Rillier, and it starts floating after them. And the dude next to him loses his mind in he just starts giggling and going, hey, we're gonna die. He just loses his mind and goes insane. And after running away, I think for a couple of days, the captain, the dude that survived, was like, okay, there's no way I can outrun him, so I'm going to turn my ship around and ram into him. And he does that, and he like explodes like a blobby amorphous head of Cthulhu that starts to regenerate, but at the same time, like they just survive and make it out of there. The ending, it's kind of confusing as to why him running the ship into Cthulhu did anything to Cthulhu at all, actually. Or maybe he did die, because he ends up with an idol of Cthulhu, and he's just sitting inside of, and he does eventually get killed by a cultist. So maybe I just need to read some more Lovecraft. But basically, he kind of survives, and he makes it back to his wife before he eventually dies. But then you are just left with Man, the dude that's going through all these letters and trying to put all this whole story together. He's just faced with the reality that there's some great horror out there, and he thinks that the cult is gonna come and kill him now. And he's like, I'm just recording my thoughts, but I don't want anyone else to piece all this together because your brain, you can't sleep at night. The horror is so all consuming. But I mean, when you really know that so much of the amorphous fear that he creates in this book is attached to his own non-specific fear of other cultures and people, it kind of takes away a lot of the bite of the book. And, you know, a lot of other books do it better. Case in point, City We Became, review coming soon. But yeah, I think I really enjoyed the world building of it. And honestly, this form of old-timey racism in fictional books, it doesn't really hit hard. You know, it's the racism in this book is so overblown in its descriptions. Like, it's so comically and generically racist. It's classic racism, but like 19th century. So like, just the phrase Louisiana diabolics, it's just like, it's such overblown racism that I'm sorry, it's kind of goofy, it's kind of comical to me. I still think that is trash, but hey, I mean, I had a good time, even with his shitty views. I go more in depth on my thoughts on the book, talking about it within my City We Became review, because that is the book that made me read Call of Cthulhu, because she actually interacts with H.P. Lovecraft's world, and I think it's so cool the way she does it. And I mean, just kiss the earth that N.K. Jemisin walks on while she writes. Sits down with her feet planted on the ground while she writes. Anyway, signing off. Goodbye.